Warning: violence. 2 weeks have passed since Yin's arrival in Magnus. She spent most of her time reading as usual. Sometimes she would go to the gardens to stroll. Sometimes her and her mother would spend the afternoon over tea and cake. Currently, this afternoon is one of those. Yin sat in the drawing room with her mother for their afternoon tea. "How are you feeling?" her mother asked, tilting her head as she looked at Yin with a smile. Yin, who has been staring at the window, turned to face her mother. She nodded. "I'm fine," then raised her cup and drank her tea. These past 2 weeks, Yin had tried to distract herself by finding new hobbies, but she always found herself doing the same thing she'd occasionally do, like reading or strolling around the garden. Yin was also developed a new habit of standing before a window where she could see the townspeople. The protests had died down eventually, and they hadn't come back since. However, there were still a few individuals who were too stubborn to go away and decide to stay outside the palace gates. Sometimes they even slept there. Every time Yin would come up and see them, though, the window, the feeling of guilt would wash over her. It hurts to see the people like how they are now, but Yin couldn't take herself to just look away. It's like she's unknowingly punishing herself by reminding herself every day of the effects of her actions. "Are you?" The sudden tone in her mother's voice changed. There's hesitation, and Yin knew what she was about to ask. "Are you ready to go back?" Yin looked down. "No." Yin wants to go back to Igneous, so that Magnus could finally be supported by her husband, but she found herself not ready yet. The thought of her husband gives her anxiety and anxious for what he did. Yin had told herself to push her emotions away, to be strong, and to go back in an unbearable court of her husband. But in the end, she would always cower. Yin had also tried to reach out to her father to discuss another option, but the king of Magnus refused to show himself yet. The only people are allowed to see him were her mother and Zabi, who regularly informed him of other duties to be done. "Are you scared?" her mother asked. Scared? Yin had never recognized the part of her that had become scared of her husband, but indeed, she is scared. "It's been 2 weeks, dear. I was hoping you would try and go back." Letting out a breath, Yin placed her teacup on the saucer of the table and soon stood up. "I think I want to go out to town. Am I allowed to go?" "It's too dangerous to go out yet," her mother said. "People might attack." Hopeless, Yin let out another breath once again. "I see. I'll just spend the rest of the afternoon in the library. If you need me, I'll be in there." "All right, dear." Yin turned and left the drawing room. 3 weeks had passed since Yin's arrival in Magnus. Yin's mother received a letter from her sister. We're going to call her Sin, for her sister's name. Sin said that she's coming home soon with her husband and their children. Yin's mother immediately sent them a letter saying it's best not to come home yet. Yin was ecstatic to finally see her sister again after a long time, but it was unfortunate that the conflict must be dealt with first before she came home. Meanwhile, her brother decided to help her father by doing his paperwork. The noble he's been courting hadn't an appreciation yet. Perhaps her brother is too busy? Yin approved many times to help, but her brother refused, saying that Yin does not need to stress herself anymore. So, to make Yin's times worthwhile, she sorted through her parchment and tried to will herself finally to make a decision on coming back. She failed. Again. 4 weeks had passed since Yin's arrival to Magnus. One night, Yin received a letter from Uraraka. It was the first letter she had received from her. Uraraka asked for her well-being and advised her not to stress too much. She informed that things were the same in Igneous, but not too much for Uraraka. Everyone just went through their days like they were normally would. Midoriya still has a lot of work to do as a scholar and advisor. The king also screams at everyone's head off. Yin flinched at the mention of him. And parties are still being held by Kirishima. Uraraka said that her days had been difficult, though. Since Yin was no longer there, she was assigned to serve the other nobles, especially the snobby ladies, as what Uraraka quoted in the court. Uraraka would still go and clean Yin's chambers once in a week. Yin felt thankful for that. The letter ended with Uraraka wishing Yin well. Suddenly, Yin found herself smiling, and with a surge of energy, she got up and went to her table to grab a piece of parchment and ink. She then started to write her reply. After Yin was done, she put on her robe and went out of her room to send the letter. As she was walking through the halls, Yin caught something from outside. As she leaned to the window, she saw that the townspeople filled the front gates of the palace yet again. Like before, they were screaming and holding torches. Yin also saw some of them holding stakes and pitchforks. Yin? At the call of her name, she turned to see her brother, walking up to her. What are you doing here? They're back. Yin ignored the question. Yes, and more angry than ever. Her brother stopped in front of her. You should go back to your room. I saw some of them attempting to throw rocks at the window. They're forcing their way inside. Yes, they're trying everything to do. Some are even using their quirks. And if they succeed, I want you to immediately go to Mother. I'll also send more guards to your room. What about you? I'll be careful, her brother reassured. Now go. She nodded and raised her arms to pat her brother's arms reassuringly. Yin returned and started walking back to her bedroom as fast as she could. Their angry screams were defending and painfully panged appeared on her chest. Yin could feel that her screams echoed hunger for food. And a capable monarchy. Yin reached her bedroom and immediately went inside. She wrapped her robe tighter around her form and sat in her bed. It was quiet for a moment before a knock retorted. It's me, Your Majesty. She recognized the voice of her lady-in-waiting. Yin sat up and went to open her door. I'll stay here and accompany you, the lady-in-waiting said. Yin also noticed more guards were situated outside her room. Thank you. Once again, Yin was back sitting on her bed with her lady-in-waiting sat on a chair by the fireplace. They both sat stiffly, listening to loud screams outside. Suddenly, the sound of glass breaking reverberated. Yin jumped to look at the lady-in-waiting. Said woman immediately grabbed a candelabra to reach out for Yin. I must go to my mother. The lady-in-waiting nodded and slowly opened the door. When she saw the guards still there, she opened the door wider and motioned for Yin. Then they started walking in the hallway to her mother's chambers. 2 guards followed behind. Yin kept her hands to herself, afraid that her quirk might activate if she became startled. What is going on? Just as they passed the staircase, Yin heard her mother's voice. She looked down to see what it was indeed her mother downstairs, asking the guards. Yin immediately went down, and when she reached her mother, she grabbed her arm. Yin! Her mother startled. What in God's name is happening? Another sound of glass shattering retorted before Yin could even answer. Both royals sheered nervously at the window. Mother! Yin turned to the older woman. We must go back to your chambers. It's much safer there. There are people trying to break inside. Oh, God. Her mother let out a shaky breath. She then started to pull Yin back upstairs. Just as they started ascending the steps, they suddenly heard a loud gunshot. Yin's mother screamed, and Yin immediately wrapped her arms around her mother's form and pushed themselves down. What is happening? Oh, God, save us. Her mother panicked. Yin dared to look at what was happening and saw a couple of guards trying to take down a man holding a musket. I don't know what that is, but said man was aiming the firearm to Yin's direction, and it terrified Yin that the gunshot from earlier was directed to them. The man was pushing away the soldiers, trying to reload his firearm. He was starting getting violent, hitting the soldiers with a musket, until another gunshot ran and the man fell down. Yin's eyes widened as she heard
her tears creeping out. Her mother continued to shake and cry in her arms. The air stilled as no one dared to move. The man lay there, unmoving as blood oozed on the floor. All of a sudden, Yin broke apart from her mother. She started running to the man, ignoring the desperate calls from her mother. As soon as she got to the man, she knelt, her nightwear stained in blood. Yin leaned down and could still faintly hear the man's breathing. He was shot in the stomach and losing blood. "Your Majesty, get away from him," the guard called. "No, I can fix him." She shook her head. The guards came to her and tried to pull her away, but she fought back. "I can heal him, please." Just as her ability can pull anything apart, her ability also allows her to pull anything back together. But she can also fix the things destroyed. "It's too dangerous, Your Majesty. What if he wakes up and suddenly attacks?" "You hold him down before he can even move," Yin said as she moved and inspected the shot of the man's stomach. Slowly, she placed a hand over the wound and bit her lip, forcing the area where the wound is. "I'm sorry," she mumbled as her palm glowed red. The man started groaning as bits of his stomach started to deteriorate. Before he could lose a lot of more blood, Yin immediately let her palm glow golden, and the damaged part started to repair. Slowly, the man's wound started to disappear as the skin rebuilt to look like it wasn't damaged before. You'll be fine, she whimpered. His groans died down as the wound finally healed. Finally, when it finished, the man remained still, and his breathing went back to normal. Yin let out a revealed sigh, and both fell back. The guards made a move to grab Yin away from the man, but suddenly the man's eyes shot open. He looked at Yin and suddenly sat up. He then charged at her with his hands reaching for her neck. The female was startled when the man pinned her down to the floor, his hands wrapped tightly around her neck, cutting her airflow. Yin started to choke and struggle. "Get him!" She heard her mother yell as the guards grabbed the man and pushed him off of Yin. Her heart is painfully beating from fear. Yin felt herself being pulled from the ground and into her mother's arms. Her mother's tears fell as she embraced her daughter. Yin continued to shake as she watched the man being dragged away by the guards. While being forced to go, the man started screaming, "You have failed us! You have failed us all!" 4 weeks and 2 days have passed since Yin's arrival in Magnus. The palace increased their security since that incident. Yin found out that 2 men managed to get inside. The other was found immediately, while the man who tried to harm Yin and her mother managed to slip past the guards. They said he stole the guard's musket, hence why he had it that time. The 2 were sent to prison, while the others who protested were dealt with. Yin's brother managed to push them back, and they hadn't come back since. 2 days have passed since that night, and Yin was a little shaken. She hadn't got much sleep since then. The night is no different. It's late, and Yin still finds herself awake. She sat on her chair, gazing at the window, while the lady-in-waiting who accompanied her had fallen asleep in one of those chairs by the fireplace. When Yin got tired of staring, she stood and decided to go out to read in the library. "Where are you going, Your Majesty?" one of the guards situated outside her room said as she stepped outside. "The library." The guards nodded. One decided to accompany Yin while the other one remained. As soon as Yin reached the door of the library, she told the guard that she'll be fine by herself inside. The guard accompanied and stood by the door while Yin went inside. She wrapped her robe tighter around her as she skimmed through many books. After choosing one, she walked to the chairs by the unital fireplace. Yin tried to down herself in the book, but halfway through the first chapter, she thought it's drifted to the incident. So much that she hadn't noticed another presence entering the room.
"You are disturbed." Yin jumped and looked up to see an unexpected visitor. Father." Yin suddenly felt the need to run and embrace her father after not seeing him for such a long time, but she stopped after her father stepped to the light, and she saw how his appearance changed. He grew a beard, and his hair appeared to be much more longer and unkempt. His eyes sunken, and there was dark bags under them. Her father looks like a mess. Her heart sank after seeing him like this. Once poised and kind king now looked tired as he depressedly sulked. You... Yin couldn't speak anymore. She just watched as her father moved to sit on the chair across from her. Sit down, he said, and Yin complied. Slowly sitting down, Yin remained quiet and waited for her father. How do you feel, daughter? Yin has heard the question many times, but that coming from her father, who had not seen her for a while and who had carried the blame like her, sounds different than the others. There's a scientific tone pressing on her father's words that Yin couldn't help but be honest. I feel terrified, she said honestly, because I realize that all these are the coincidences of my wrongdoings. I failed as a wife and a queen. I failed as the only last hope on helping this kingdom. Failed as a wife, you say? I'm sure you heard of that, of what happened between me and my husband. If anything, it is not your fault, daughter. Yin smiled bitterly. Is that so? Because every time I see them screaming, I'm reminded of their suffering. And I was reminded that it is my fault. If you feel that, you only need to make a decision. Yin went still. Go back, Yin. Yin knows that at this point, there's no other option but that. And Yin also knows and had only knowledge that her hesitance of coming back to Igneous is the fear of her husband. I'm scared, father, Yin confessed. Her voice broke as tears started to prick the corners of her eyes. I'm scared to face him again. Her father's eyes softened and remained silent. I know that in order to save our kingdom, I must go back there again. But I can't. I can't will myself to go back there because my fear of his holds me back, she breathed shakily. I'm also scared that if I go back there, everything will just be the same. My husband does not care for his people and lets them suffer all for his glory, and I can't stand by that. I can't stand going there and not being able to help and make a change. This time, the tears had escaped Yin's eyes. Her vision blurred as the tears kept coming, but she saw her father stood and walk up to her. He knelt in front of her and met her eyes. Is that what you want, Yin? To help the people of Igneous too? Yes. And your husband? His eyes now bore on your eye-colored ones. What do you want from him? Yin remained quiet at that question. She suddenly found herself deep in her thoughts. And when she finally went to answer, she spoke. I want him to recognize what I've been doing is for the good of the kingdom and Igneous and its people. And I want him to see that I can be his equal too. That I can do something great as well. King Lin smiled. Then, with that resolve, you have nothing to fear, Yin. You don't have to fear your husband, he spoke softly. Once more, if you are willing, you can surpass him, and you can bring good to both Igneous and Magnius. Yin noticed that her father's smile was a lingering irritation under it. What do you mean, father? That's when your father's smile became wider, and the intention behind it was no longer hidden. Igneous. If the king dies without an heir, the throne will go to the queen.